There are some things which cannot simply be learned in the classroom. Someone applying for the job hears from the recruiter, "I see you did well in school, but what real-world skills do you have?" And the response is, "Tests. I can take tests." Some things cannot be learned in the calm serenity of a study space. Some things can only be learned when we face the situation that calls forth the required skill to have. And this is what Lent is about in a smaller kind of way as we reflect on the story of Lazarus. That there is a testing, but it's a real world testing. And from that we grow spiritually. Jesus understood with his disciples, and remember, disciples is just a fancy word for they are learners. We tend to think of them as followers, but they are people who learn. Jesus understood what it means to learn. And he knew that if he were to teach some ideas to his disciples in the calm of a hillside, in the serenity of a safe classroom, that they'd remain ideas. They wouldn't seep into more than just the heart, but into muscle memory. We know that when the brain learns something, it's stored away. But when you're in a stressful situation, when the pressure is on you, when there's this heavy load bearing down upon you, and you need your brain to access that information, you can't find it. Because those parts of your brain, they are shut down. And so what people will do is, well, let's learn in the difficult situation. Let's learn where we're going to be practicing. Jesus is teaching his disciples about this idea of following them and picking up their cross. And Jesus knows they're not really going to have much of a load if they can't experience suffering with me. They have to watch me suffer, and they have to watch me carry my cross so that they know what it means to carry a cross. Not in an easy way, but in a way that involves struggles. You can imagine this idea of overloading the brain in order to teach a skill that's required to be accessed while we're under stress. If anyone's done military basic training, or you've seen it, you get the idea. You don't sit in a classroom and learn ideas. You practice while live rounds are firing over your head. Imagine the pilot who is in the flight simulator learning how to respond to engine failure. That training has to have all of the feels, all of the sounds, all of the visuals of what the pilot will experience while they're in the cockpit. The flight simulator has alarms blaring, it has its nose diving, it's got lights flashing. And the student pilot comes to store memories in the midst of that struggle, in the midst of that crisis. It's what they call emotion-dependent learning. If you are scared when you learn something, then when you're scared, you're able to re-access it. If your brain is overwhelmed when you learn the thing, then when you need to recall it, when your brain is overwhelmed, it's going to be there for you. And so that's a bit of what's going on in this Lazarus story. It seems cruel. It seems that it lacks compassion, that Jesus, hearing that Lazarus is ill, does anything other than drop everything and run out to see if he can help. After having heard that Lazarus was ill, Jesus, what's he going to do? What's he going to do? The story says he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. He intentionally, and the way that it's spoken in scripture passages, saying to his disciples, this illness will be an opportunity for us to experience the glory of God. Jesus allows a difficulty to arise. And that's when he can teach the disciples something important for them to know. Now, talking about basic training, fighter pilots. Philosophers have long argued that the most stressful situation that human beings experience isn't war per se, it isn't your life being threatened per se. The most stressful thing is simply an idea that one day we may no longer exist. Sartre puts it, it is not a matter of believing that one will die, but of the sudden staggering realization that the nothing is there under our feet waiting for us. It can be very overwhelming for a young person the first time their growing brains allow them to consider this idea that what does it mean that one day I will die and none of this will be? That is considered one of the most difficult stressors to negotiate for a human being. Jesus is teaching into this awareness, this idea that one day, like Lazarus, lights are out. There's nothing else. And so Jesus delays 2 days, 4 days, and he arrives to the site, to the tomb, where Lazarus is dead. And that is where his greatest teaching occurs, short of his death and resurrection itself. You don't have to read this article. You probably can't see it, but it's an article about this idea that when we learn something while experiencing a difficult emotion, then we can recall that thing when we're facing a real life experience with that difficult emotion. Jesus didn't read this article. It got published a few years after him, but the idea is there. Jesus knows I can talk to my people about this idea of what comes after death, but it'll just be a cute idea for them. I need to show them. I need to talk to my people while they are stressed out. And so we have these 3 moments of teaching under stress that occur. The first one is when Jesus hears that Lazarus is sick, and he says, let's go to Jerusalem. That strikes fear in the hearts of his disciples, and they say to him, Rabbi, whoa, they were just about to stone us, and you want to go there again? They are afraid. And in that moment, Jesus teaches them, we can walk in the light when there is darkness. It's so metaphorical, they won't understand it if it's just an idea. But he says, if you're going to follow me, you are with me, and I will light your way. The next part is the in-between space. 2 miles out from where Lazarus is buried, the sisters, they come out, and they are weeping. You can hear in their voice their disappointment. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Jesus says to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. Interesting idea, but it can't sink in to where it needs to sit unless it's taught while someone is grappling with the deepest depths of grief. And then finally, we have this setting, and the scripture passage doesn't hold out in describing the reality of death. It describes the sight, but also the stench. Not a word you want to hear on Sunday morning, but there it is in the gospel lesson. The stench of 4 days of death. Lord, already there is a stench because he has been dead for 4 days. And it's in that reality of death that Jesus says, Lazarus, come forth. And he teaches them, you can be unbound. Unbind him. Let him go. Following Jesus in Lent on the road to his crucifixion, picking up our cross and following Jesus, cannot be learned in a classroom. It has to be learned by participating in the suffering and participating in the realization of the finality of death in order to hear the message that death does not have the last word. Let me end with this story. Maybe you've heard it in history class while countries were exploring the Antarctica. There was one ship, the Endurance, you see pictured there, caught in the ice, captained by Ernest Stapleton, and they became trapped in the dense ice of Antarctica. They had to abandon ship because the ice just started crushing the ship. And it's an interesting story because what the captain did is he knew that eventually they would have to make their way in their lifeboats to some landmass, but over the treachery of ice and it's cold and the dangers. And for weeks and weeks, he prepared his crew by making sure that they lived on the ice doing things they would normally do. He had them building snowmen. He had them performing mock trials while they were caught on the ice. He had them playing sports, having them realize that in this difficult terrain, they can learn how to keep their humanity. And it paid off because when it came time to push out into this snow wilderness, they were able to do so. No one mutinied. Everyone survived. A case of frostbite, amputated toes was the greatest loss that was experienced. Like Stapleton, Jesus knows that this life that we have is one where we carry our cross every day so that we know how to follow Jesus during the difficult times. In this season of Lent, we're doing a smaller version of it. We are finding ways to face the reality of life's sufferings, maybe depriving ourselves of something that is a pleasure, so that in that mini suffering, in that contemplation of the difficulties of life, we can listen for God's voice and God's call on our lives, and we can be assured that God has for us new life in Jesus Christ. Amen.